the old way is using automation to increase efficiency in a way that replaces people, but the new way that I'm saying is is creating intelligence that augments human capability. Because I feel like if you
I
if
think
you
the one
if you
you're
again
referring to is we are not automating work, we are orchestrating intelligence.
the ethical use of the tools is not to give someone, imagine like you're giving someone a pen that is better than every other pen. It helps people write faster. And now as a result of giving the person the pen, they're writing more. Like they're spending more time writing, which is paradoxical because you're like, you could save time. You could do the same amount of work in half the time with this pen. But because you're so like, I can accomplish so much, you just keep using the pen. How you prompt is an algorithm. Saying, like, tell me a dad joke or tell me a dad joke in a maximum of 10 words with a theme of um you know coming home after a long trip in a Canadian context, specifically a Torontonian context, right? They're those are just algorithms. Like it ends up being numbers to the model, that the number and the model is then predicting what number comes after the number. That's an oversimplification, but that is in truth what's happening when you interact with AI.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Weekly. The Cyber Week is a podcast which talks about cybersecurity. Joined with me today is Junior Williams. Junior Williams is a known person in terms of cybersecurity, especially cybersecurity and AI. He will tell us a little bit about himself. Thank you, Junior Williams, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dio. Thanks for having me. So you want me to give you a little bit of background?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a story. I tell it differently every time, but I started my journey in tech many moons ago, 1993 to be precise. I learned object-oriented programming in C. I was still a freshman in high school, and so I was basically coding throughout my teens. I got my first job still in high school, um, working for Sprint Canada as a systems analyst. So started off in help desk, but then very quickly moved on to being the person who actually follows up on the service tickets. So I learned, having already been a programmer, um, and doing pretty much tech support my whole life. Learned, networking, so doing network administration. Um, Early 2000s, I was, one of the first doing web application development. So moving from static HTML into actual um, application server pages, Microsoft ASP.NET, ADO.NET, this kind of stuff. And then I stayed in that kind of space in IT, just, being a generalist and doing a little bit of everything, um, web design. And I've always had like side projects. So regardless if I'm working full time with someone, but I'm doing, stuff on the side for small businesses. And around 2017, I decided I was going to, turn over a new leaf, try something different, and um, end up actually as an investigator, private investigator, um, which it probably has a lot of connotations. People think about like domestic type of stuff, but the firms I work with never did domestic. They were all corporate. We only worked for lawyers and law firms and like the banks and insurance fraud investigations is a big part of that. But I um I ended up doing pretty much everything you'd imagine an investigator does, from surveillance and doing, canvassing and taking statements, conducting interviews. But my main focus was as a research analyst, so doing online investigations and, open source intelligence, financial backgrounds, due diligence, location, skip tracing, and all that. But also because my background, they put me into doing digital forensics work, and at that point, I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't escape tech, so let me just lean back in, and I started the journey of getting certifications, more so to, be accredited for doing what I could already do. And then I decided I was just going to go full stack cybersecurity. And then since I've started in this journey, I've pretty much done everything in cybersecurity. So, from risk assessments to policy development and penetration testing, incident response, and which brings me to, well, I mean, there's lots of other little steps along the way, but um, in 2024, I was doing VCISO work, so Virtual Chief Information Security Officer work in critical infrastructure. The company I was working with ended up um, going belly up. They went into insolvency, which put me out as a unsecured creditor. And then I was like, that led me to find my current full-time role for stability as a solutions architect. And in this role, it's a really large mixed bag. So if you imagine, like, our clients are big industry, um, enterprise and public sector, and my role is to architect solutions for these uh, you know enterprise public sector clients, but the solutions involve often multiple of our partners that we resell and integrate their technology. So all the household names you've heard of, the hyperscalers, AWS, Google, Microsoft, you know, SentinelOne, all the cybersecurity companies, where I am in constant close contact and working with these individual stakeholders to basically create solutions that align with our clients' objectives. And in along this journey, I'm a lifelong learner. So there's things I do every day in terms of like keeping my skills sharp, even though might not be hands-on keyboard like. And we should obviously touch on AI. So I've been, studying AI for quite some time, like decades, but really hands-on starting in March of 2020 with OpenAI's GPT-2. And since then, I've been, this is where I consider myself an AI researcher. I've published a couple papers, and my area of research is concerned with algorithmic innovation and state-of-the-art large language models. To that effect, the latter, I've used everything and do use everything. Most recently, I've went on um, an agent development kind of binge. In the past week, I made over a dozen agents in a full-blown application, um, des- designed, built, tested, debugged by these agents, where I'm basically like, setting off tasks, having the agents post updates to GitHub, and I'm just, human in the loop testing the applications and using it kind of as a, home lab. It's like you built the application, it does what it does, and then I'm like, okay, well, how do I secure the application? How do I, ensure that it can't be used as a vector, an attack vector, and then applying these learnings, and also, um, you know, getting a chance to use the tools that I'm afforded by all of our partners. So that's my
Mm,
background in a nutshell.
that's great and interesting. When you look into your background, uh, we've definitely hinted on some of the things about models and all that. But there's a recent quote you actually made that because the tools because the tools that help you stay ahead are the same ones because of the tools that help you stay ahead are the same ones that can leave you exposed. Are you building guardrails or waiting for a breach? What does that actually really mean to you?
So yeah, that's actually that phrasing sounds very familiar. Some of the stuff I've written. Um, so I mean, there's many approaches, and I'll tell a story roundabout like I usually do. Um, so my journey started immersing in tech, and then I figured out the ways to use it, and then I figured out that there were other people that knew more than I did. So I went backwards in the sense that if you look at people, processes, and technology, I went technology, processes, people, right? Now that I've, been around a few times, then I started realizing like, okay, so how do we, build more secure systems? So I came across the concepts of secure by design or secure defaults. Also came by governance frameworks, and oftentimes these governance frameworks are concerned with compliance mainly, which you can be compliant and not be secure. You can be secure and not be compliant, right? But I'm like trying to, I guess, blend the best of both worlds. And so to get back to your question of the tools being exacerbating or expanding the attack surface and the guardrails that are necessary to protect against the usage of these tools. I would say that I am walking the talk, and this is the reason why I experiment. So it's there's different camps, right? So there's the camp that's like, oh, there's new tools. And there's new, software. Let's use it. Like, let's just use it. Forget, like, who cares about security and all that stuff? Like, we just gotta use it. Now, and then there's the other side, which is like, oh no, like, we can't use it. We don't understand it. We have to do things how we've always done them. We're resistant to change, right? And there's flaws with both approaches, right? Because if you are too resistant to change, well, the change is going to come regardless. The question is, are you going to be prepared for it? And if you're too, full steam ahead and not mindful of the repercussions, well, then you're also in for a world of pain, right? So I myself am not one to take, you know, the the letter of the frameworks or the guidance that's provided as being like, um, immutable. I'm going to experiment for myself. So I guess as a roundabout way of saying that um, you can't be ignorant to the dangers, right? But you also can't be so afraid of the dangers that you don't experiment. Because the thing is that there is a risk in being risk averse. Kodak is an example I always like to use. So Kodak, the film company, you know, they didn't innovate and now they're bankrupt. When digital film started coming into play picture, okay. Once upon a time, I heard the story again recently. Blockbuster, the movie rental place, had an opportunity to purchase Netflix at one point, and they didn't. And well, where's Blockbuster and where's Netflix, right? So there has to be a balance between doing things without guardrails and forming some type of structure. But in all honesty, it involves or requires, well, two things. One, an open mind and continuous learning, right? And two, breaking down a siloed way of thinking. Because and especially like the bigger the organization, everyone is in their lane as to what they do. So when you're talking about, um, enterprise applications and application security, you find the developers are like, well, we just develop code. And the security folks are like, we just, review code, or we just, put policies in place. But now, whether or not the policies are enforced, whether they're enforceable, whether they stifle innovation, to the security folks, most security folks, they're just like, well, our job is to keep things secure. And sometimes in approaching it the old way, in gatekeeping things and being prohibitive, all they're doing is actually, increasing the risk through things like shadow IT.
Okay, that's interesting. Uh, do you feel does you said you've so far done 2 papers, and those 2 papers, do they cover such areas, or are there any specific areas that you looked at that is key for our audience to know about?
So they are not security related. They are 100% AI and algorithmic innovation. And I'll give you Um, I give you the what prompted them. Pardon the expression or pun. Um, so when DeepSeek R1 came out a while back, it wiped $1 trillion of equity off the stock market. And the reason it did that, or how it did that, why? Because, you know, big business was like, well, how were they able to come out with a model that is outperforming the best model, and they did it at a fraction of the cost? Maybe we should be rethinking what our investment in hardware if, you know, this company is able to come out of nowhere and produce better software with worse hardware, right? So that had me thinking like about that reminded me of the scaling laws, as they refer to, like, so Moore's law and Huang's law, right? Which really has to do with the speed at which compute and storage increases, and there's that temporal constraint. So roughly doubling every 2 years, like, let's just say. And I'm like, well, that might be true, but if and traditionally the performance of different systems was dependent on the hardware. Like, you double the speed of the hardware, then, you get a proportion, a linear increase to the efficacy of the software running on it, right? It's just that we're measuring things like the amount of time it takes for a computer to boot up, the amount of time it takes for an application to start, the amount of time it takes to read a file, these type of things, right? But when you move to an era where it's like, the order of magnitude is like the difference in milliseconds, it's kind of doesn't really matter like how quickly, because it's quick enough. It's fast enough, right? So then it begins to the second thing, which is um we're looking at AI applications, right? So like computer vision. The speed at which a computer can recognize an image, like describe the image, right, has been and still is to some degree tied linearly to hardware performance. But, and this is what one of the things, the themes of my paper is, when we look at the algorithmic innovation across different applications of AI, what we see is that the greatest leaps in performance have come from an algorithmic tweak. So that's what prompted the writing the first paper. The reason why it's called Williams' Law is a nod to Moore's Law and Huang's Law, right? And it's not necessary to replace them, but I find it's required that we have them at this point. Or that we start thinking about it in this point. And there's a number of reasons why, like, because a lot of people read the papers and they're like, okay, so what? How do we take this and, I don't know, make more money or do something better with it? Well, that's actually leads to the third paper I'm writing on, which is so I guess I should say the second paper. The second paper builds on the first paper, and actually I came up with it when OpenAI released GPT 4.5. And because of I read their white paper, and I noticed that they implemented a lot of the reinforcement learning techniques from the DeepSeek white paper and approach. I'm like, okay, cool. So this is, again, to me, confirming what I'm postulating, which is that algorithmic innovation leads to exponential increases in AI performance. And I don't give it a temporal constraint, because there's no temporal constraint. It's like when the algorithm innovates, you get that jump, right? Um, but so then the people will be like, well, but there's no temporal constraint. Like, you're not able to predict when this jump will occur. But here's the thing. So I'm working on the third paper, which is operationalizing Williams' Law, because this is now an acknowledgement of the fact that when you look at say those chips, the GPUs, right? Do you know that GPUs nowadays and CPUs are not they get faster, you know, but it's now AI that's designing it. So we are literally at a point where we are using AI to design faster chips to train better AI to design faster chips, right? So we're in this kind of like a loop where, and so the other thing I've noticed is that we are using algorithms to develop better and faster algorithms. But here's the missing piece that I talk about. Um, we are not looking at the cost or the efficiency of the algorithm, right? Because there's a difference between efficiency and performance, right? Like you can create an algorithm that performs better, but is less efficient when you factor in what it took to train or to innovate the algorithm itself. See, most people are like, well, if the new algorithm does it faster and better than the old one, then that would be an increase in efficiency. And you're correct. But if you look at it overall, right? Look what's happening. Why so we're developing more efficient algorithms, but we're also building more data centers and bigger data centers. And the data centers have a real environmental impact. So I am theorizing that if we apply this um metric, so there's two things that you can get out of it. One, you can I provide a framework to measure the efficiency of algorithms, right? So if you're choosing which algorithm to use for a given use case, you can apply this framework to determine which is the more efficient of the algorithms. But even more importantly, you can implement this. So when you use algorithms to discover algorithms, one of the metrics or criteria for discovering a better algorithm is that it is more efficient, right? And so that's basically what Williams law has to do with. It has to do with, um, you know, doing more with less. Like from what I'm saying, if if you think ahead to like 50 years, I think that they will have algorithms that would make older hardware not be obsolete anymore. Like we'll literally get to a point where like they'll develop like a large language model that will be able to run on, laptops from 2010 and are better than the current best models that are on in the data centers. Like that's when you follow the graph, right? Like linear progression or exponential progression,
So it
there seems
becomes
to
a
be only
bell
one outcome.
curve. So
Yeah, exactly that.
yeah, interesting. But to some point, I feel like we might be still in the early stages, or according to you, do you feel like we are now in the middle and people are overutilizing it like the way it's expected to be utilized?
I think what we are in is we are in the era before they call it artificial general intelligence. Although they keep changing how that's defined or what they even want to call it. But we are in the era of super intelligence, which is where it's not necessarily the computers that are super intelligent, but like the concept of wealth inequality. Like some people
Yeah.
have a lot more, some people have a lot less. Some countries have a lot more, some countries have a lot less. Well,
True.
knowledge and and processing capabilities, it's even worse. Like if you compare the person, like someone like myself, who is building like essentially an army of agents, to someone who's like, what's AI? Our capabilities are just, it's like you really can't compare. Like I'm like designing agents that replace not just people but departments. Now, I want to say that with a caveat because I talk a lot about this in terms of ethics, right? In fact, I just posted an article today that talks about this. Um, the old way is using automation to increase efficiency in a way that replaces people, but the new way that I'm saying is is creating intelligence that augments human capability. Because I feel like
I think the one
if you
you're
again,
referring to is we are not automating work, we are orchestrating intelligence. One
yes,
replaces you, the other one makes impossibly fast. The other makes you impossibly fast. Every
yes,
week, the baseline shifts. You are either conducting an orchestra or playing solo, while everyone else moved on. the machines take you. The machines are tapping you in.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly that. So because if you look at it this way, right? So what if we can replace every non-manual labor job? So what? What's going to happen? You're going to have a lot of people out of work, and you're going to have a lot fewer people have a lot more money. So as a humanity, as a global populace, if we are going to, as a people, like a global populace, get better, then we're going to have to help people be better. And the way to make people better is by giving them tools to build, or even just to do art, even just to create, to live, right, better, as opposed to having some corporations consolidate power and make more money. Because my economic I guess principle is this, right? And this, like, any reasonable person would agree. If you have large corporations and individuals taking or making more money, what do? You can think of it as chips. They're hoarding chips, right? They hoard more chips than they can ever spend. So what does that mean? That means less chips for everyone else, and there's more and more people, and the price of everything goes up. So what's going to happen? Like, doesn't take a super intelligence or even AI to be like, to see where that's headed. It's not a good place, right? So that's why, and so what I think is the remedy to that is not hoping that, big tech and nation states be like, clue into this. No, no, no. What it will help is when everybody, like people, global population, there's a consensus. We all believe that we can have, no poverty, and we can have, once everyone believes that's the case, I know it's the case. I absolutely know it's the case, but it will only ever happen if the majority of people, and the majority of people believe that that's the case. That's what's going to happen. Like, yeah, there's going to be still competing influences, big corporations that, and wealthy individuals that just want to acquire more and more and more, right? But it's not going to be like what it is now, because what it is now is quite the opposite. There's large populations of people that are like, I don't like AI. I have an adult daughter who doesn't, like, she says things like, I don't like AI. And I'm like, I mean, it's kind of a wrong-headed proposition. Like, when you say I don't like AI, you're making AI seem like it's a person, right? It's
Yeah.
AI is a reference to a wide range of technologies. And even if you're talking about one specific application, like, say, ChatGPT, right? The
Mm.
ChatGPT now is different than the ChatGPT 5 minutes ago. It's constantly changing, and it's not a thing, but it's a tool. And, what we need is everyone, um, everyone in agreement that if we use these tools appropriately, we can solve problems.
True. According to you, if you're looking at it in the cybersecurity perspective, definitely jobs are going to be lost, and they are already being lost because of the automation. You find that in the SOC team now, jobs can be reduced greatly because most of the automation systems have already been set in place with AI. Currently, how do you see it in playing out in the cybersecurity industry?
So it's interesting you say that. I literally got an email this morning from in teaser. They're, hi Junior, I want to share an important update that blah 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 that directly addresses a major challenge facing SOC teams today. And the subject of the email is announcing and teaser forensic AI SOC platform. So exactly what you said. They are basically like, hey, who needs a SOC when you can just have a SOC in a box? You can have SOC as a service, a SOC as an AI driven service, right? So my response to that is, now, I'm wearing Sentinel-1.
Yeah.
Now they're a partner. I'm not wearing this as an endorsement, although I do like Sentinel-1. One of the
Okay.
things I like about Sentinel-1, right? And I partner with CrowdStrike, and I partner with Trend Micro, so I am vendor objective. Like, please, if
Mm.
you're watching this, don't think that I am partial to any. If you ask me what's the best anything, my answer is always yes. Like, what's the best of these three things? Yes,
Mm,
that's always going to be my answer.
mm,
But the reason why I like one of the reasons why I like Sentinel-1 is that it's an empowering tool. It was always meant to be an empowering tool in the sense that it's it's it makes the average, like it makes a relatively inexperienced SOC analyst like an experienced SOC analyst because now they have Purple AI. The experienced SOC analyst was an expert at doing grep and like writing queries to, you know, dig through logs and extract, indicators of compromise and indicators of attack and write rules and in arcane languages. But now you have Purple AI as a for instance, and you'd be like, you don't have to write these. You could just use natural language, right? So yes, there are corporations out there that are going to think that they can replace people, and there are corporations that are going to do that, and there are vendors that are going to promote their tools as replacing humans. But what I've actually seen though, and in the mission critical area, so if we're talking about like critical infrastructure, the banking systems, um, yeah, they're not replacing humans anytime soon. So where it matters, or at least not here, but where it matters, because where it matters has smart people that realize that you don't succeed by replacing smart people with machines, because then who's gonna administer the machines, right? Like so, um, if you look at the losses from the big tech, Microsoft, Google, AWS, right, Salesforce, and they're in the massive layoffs, and we know they're even saying they're laying people off because of AI. In fact, Anthropic, that makes Claude, just said that their latest, it was launched yesterday, Claude Opus 4.5, that it outperforms because they benchmark their models against every developer that they've hired, and they've now produced a model that is better at coding than every developer they've ever hired, right? So, but is Anthropic saying that, oh, we're going to replace all our developers? No, they're not, because they're acknowledging this tool. So there's always going to be these two camps. The one camp is like, no, the AI replaces humans, and this is how we leverage it to make more money. And they're not wrong. Like, you can replace humans and you can make more money. It's just not sustainable. Like it, and if you multiply that and scale that across like all the big industry, and you see where that goes, not going to a good place. So when we talk about the need for AI legislation, for instance, and global international standards, and I know because I contribute to these standards, I'm seeing a shift in focus, and there should be a shift in focus from controls, because the controls don't work. And they're always like, we talk and talk a lot about controls and guardrails, but we're talking about controls and guardrails for technology that's like a year old, which in this thing is like, it might as well be 100 years old, right? What we should be talking about is guardrails in terms of like how companies are reporting their workforce status. Like, so a real thing, it would be like, especially big tech there should be guardrails in terms of how many people they can replace. And then once those guardrails are in place, then that will make them forced to focus like the building tools that help people. And actually, and again, I'm putting on my ethical hat here. What that means is, and I know because I basically work like 14 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week, and most of the pain is self-inflicted because I am a researcher, and I do my research in the wee hours of the morning because I get very passionate and taken up by it. But is what I'm trying to say is that the ethical use of the tools is not to give someone, imagine like you're giving someone a pen that is better than every other pen. It helps people write faster. And now as a result of giving the person the pen, they're writing more. Like they're spending more time writing, which is paradoxical because you're like, you could save time, you could do the same amount of work in half the time with this pen, but because you're so like, I can accomplish so much, you just keep using the pen, right? So we need to be mindful of that. Like any type of technology that gives you back time, time is the most precious thing you have, right? So if you know, okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. If a company is like, we can save this amount of time with this tool, and we currently have our employees work 8-hour workdays, we can afford to have our employees work 6-hour workdays. There you go, right? Like, and you know what will happen? They'll actually be even more productive because science and evidence says if you give people more time back, right, and they have less stress, that's when people innovate. That's when people find out new ways of using the tools to do even more and even better things. So that's, the mindset that people have to have. It's like it's a it's a great time to do the right thing with the tools, and it's a great time to refactor our way of thinking and not just be like, okay, so we can do more, better, faster, but we can do more for ourselves in terms of giving ourselves back some time.
That is interesting. So, there are specific AIs which I noticed that perhaps you use a lot. I'm assuming basing on your articles. I've seen Claude that we've talked about, ChatGPT. I've also seen the Banana Pro. But generally, on a daily basis, what do you usually use? And mm.
You know what the answer can be? The answer is yes. Okay, I'll try to expand on that. So I use all of them. I use all of them, and I teach about it. So when and I can share materials afterwards too. But like basically, you'll never hear me say this is the best tool for that. They all have their strengths, but the thing is, they keep leapfrogging, right? So I imagine, right, if someone said, "Oh, which is the best chatbot for making images? I want to make an image," and I answered at that point in time, "Oh, it's OpenAI. Their GPT Image One, absolutely, right." And as I'm saying that, because these companies aren't um, they're not
Sleeping.
pre-announcing anything. They're just
Yeah,
releasing,
yeah.
releasing. You'll find out, like, I get a ping on my watch, like, oh, they just released a new model. Cool. Like that. I'm literally using the model. I was using Claude code in the command line yesterday. As I'm using it, it'll pop up. There's an update. Okay. Exit Claude code. I'm like, brew, update, brew, upgrade, Claude code. It went up a thing. I went back into Claude code. Before it was saying Sonnet 4.5 is the default model. Now it says Opus 4.5. I'm like, what? And then I go to do a search. I'm like, what changed? And I'm seeing the comparison against, Gemini Pro 3, which also launched. And then I'm reminded, like, there is no best model. Now, but I will say some things broadly about the models. Absolutely. So ChatGPT is, I would say, the most I guess easiest to get into. What they've started, what they put a focus on going back like over a year is hyper personalization. So, you know, it's like inferring your preferences like from every single word you type into it, right? Um, that that cut like that personalization. So you can not be, you know, super technical and just be continually using ChatGPT, and it will kind of adjust to your usage, and you'll be finding more and more value out of the box. Perplexity is one I use often. Perplexity came out shortly after ChatGPT because if you think back to when ChatGPT first came out, it wasn't even connected to the internet. Like you couldn't do searches in it. You couldn't get real time anything. Everything that it told you was based on its training data, which is already like over a year outdated, prone to hallucination because it's not grounding anything in anything, right? So Perplexity came out of the box like, okay, you like ChatGPT, cool, but we're going to give the model the ability to do web searches and to validate what it's saying so that, you know, everything, has a source, right? which is why Perplexity is great. And I use Perplexity to fact check a lot of the outputs from the other models, right? Now, if we would compare uh, Anthropic to OpenAI, right? So Anthropic was founded by former OpenAI folks. If you look at their training, their model training approach, wildly different between the two. And this is the reason why up until recently, actually, no, it's still Claude is considered the better programmer because while OpenAI trained their models on everything, Claude trained their models on quality data. They did a lot more. They put a lot more emphasis on training it, like giving it good food, whereas OpenAI just gave it everything, right? Um, Gemini, so that's Google's one, has deep integrations with obviously search, right? So real-time information and the rest of the Google platform, which is ubiquitous. And if you can imagine like the amount of data and telemetry they have to train these models, and this is why they just caught up and they have the best overall model right now, right? Then you have Grok from Open or XAI. It's kind of like it has this is all Silicon Valley, so there's like a revolving door. The people who work for one end up working for the other, so they all know each other, they all know the same things, but the approach, because of Elon Musk, is very much like a kind of like a uncensored, leaning towards uncensored, right? Like just let the models do whatever, right? Let the people do whatever they want with the models. So I think and then, well, there's so many, right? Like Alibaba, with their Quen models, Kimi K2, DeepSeek, um, and some other lesser known ones, and then plus all the open source models, and then people's um retraining of open source models. It's just like, and then where I'm at right now, using multi-agent systems. So I have workflows where I might have, I might um, launch the same prompt with two models simultaneously, and then have a third model evaluate and pick the best of the two other models, right? Like, and then as an experimentation thing, because I might switch it up. I might have the one that was doing the evaluation be the one of the ones doing the work, and swap out who does the what. Um, the other thing too about agents versus regular just chatbot interactions is that the code that makes an agent is essentially just a markdown file. Like and explains what the agent is. You, those files are small, and you keep them with you, so they're transferable. So I can create a Claude agent and then use that same code to have a Gemini agent or have a OpenAI agent, right? Like that's the agent, and the concept of an agent is really just it's a system prompt. It's a set of operating instructions. So if you ask Claude a medical question, it's gonna like answer based on the entire model. But if you make a Claude agent that says you are an expert medical diagnostician, or whatever the word is, um, you know, when you ask it a question, yeah, it still has access to the whole model, but it's not going to start with everything. It's going to start with everything it knows about medical diagnosis, right? Which makes it so much more powerful, which is in complete alignment with my concept of Williams law, which is algorithmic innovation, right? How you prompt is an algorithm. Saying, like, tell me a dad joke, or tell me a dad joke in a maximum of 10 words with a theme of um you know coming home after a long trip in a Canadian context, specifically a Torontonian context, right? Those are just algorithms. Like it ends up being numbers to the model, that the number, and the model's then predicting what number comes after the number. That's an oversimplification, but that is in truth what's happening when you interact with AI. And the last thing I'll say is that, and this is why, again, no model will ever be better than the other. They might perform better based on their mood or your mood is the non-determinism. That is a huge factor that people don't understand. When let's take a super simple example. You ask ChatGPT, and say ChatGPT not connected doing web searches, right? Just vanilla ChatGPT. What is the capital of Ontario? And it says Toronto. It's a prediction. It's not a knowledge retrieval. It's basically like saying that in its training data, Toronto has been associated with Ontario as its capital more than erroneously Ottawa has been associated being its capital, because Ottawa is in Ontario, but Ottawa is the capital of Canada, right? But you can see how ChatGPT even could hallucinate based on which echo of its memories, or not, they're not memories, which neural network activation fires first, because a lot of it is based on randomness. That's what the concept of temperature is. You can set the temperature um, a prompt to make it more or less deterministic, right? And if it's less deterministic, that's where actually the creativity comes. If you turn down the temperature to make it more deterministic, it starts becoming very unuseful, right? Like it just becomes very unuseful. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there can never be a best model unless they come up with a model that is non-deterministic. But if you understand how AI works, it's not possible.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. So as we are concluding, are there, as a person who has actually done certificates and all that, what advice would you give to someone who is actually joining the field of cybersecurity as a whole, and how AI's impact can impact their workflow in terms of maybe learning and all that? So any advice you
Yes,
would give? Mm.
absolutely. So I'll tell you about my employability matrix, or my employability framework that I've come up with. And this is based on my experience. Okay. Your employability is based on these 5 things in exactly this order. Okay. It's your network, like as in your people network, who you know, how you communicate, your ability to talk and write, right? Your hard skills. And by hard skills, I mean the skills that are relative to this role. Because the advice I'm giving is not just for cybersecurity, it's literally for anything. Most knowledge worker positions, right? Your ability to do the job. So if it's a SOC analyst, your ability to do SOC analyst work, right? Use the tools that are in place in the SOC. Then it's your certifications, right? Then it's your education, in that exact order. Now, there's something, and there's another little caveat, is to understand the difference between learning and education. They're different. You could be educated and not be doing much learning anymore. You could be lifelong learner like myself and not be educated. Like the two are, they go hand in hand, but they can be mutually exclusive. It's very possible, right? So I would advise people, especially in this day and age, okay, and people should know this, but let me remind people, okay, you can learn anything you want to learn. Right now, especially using like tools like Perplexity, anything you want to learn. I couldn't have said that before these tools. There's a lot of things I'd be like, well, if you want to do, if you want to be like a, you know, AS400 programmer, you're probably going to have to go and take a course and get some specialized, education or whatever have you, right? But now, if you are curious and you want to learn, you can learn anything. So what does that mean for people that want to get into the field, right? When employers are putting less emphasis on different certifications. Well, there's some certifications that are kind of expected for certain levels. So like, we'll start at the very top, like CISSP, right? Certified Security, Information System Security Professional, is considered like a certification you get if you had like over 6 years of experience in the field. And really what it is that it's acknowledged that amongst people that hold that certification, that we have the same, we can talk about things using the same language and will understand what each other is saying, which is very important, obviously, because you could be a really capable cyber practitioner, but what if you're unable to communicate in a way that other people take the exact same thing from the meaning of your words, right? So there's that. But there's a security roadmap, or sorry, se- cybersecurity certification roadmap that's online, and it basically has every single certification there is in cybersecurity. There's like over 600 of them, and the way they're organized is um, from the bottom to the top. It goes from beginner to advanced, and then horizontally across, it it groups these certifications into each domain of cybersecurity. So like network operations, penetration testing, incident response, like all these different groupings. So what I tell people is you need the fundamentals. If you're interested in cybersecurity, you got to know networking, right? But you don't need to take Network Plus because, like as you said, you can go online, go to chatgpt.com. You don't even need to have an account. What is networking? What is IP? How did like give me a 10 question multiple choice quiz to determine my level of proficiency in networking, and then based on the results, based on the results, give me a lesson that will increase my skills. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. You could do that and get PhD level of networking knowledge if you want to, right? Um, what does that do for you getting hired though? So that's why you got to do multiple things and be regular with it. So more effectively, get on LinkedIn and connect with people like myself. Connect with people in the roles you want to be in, and the companies you want to work for, and the places you want to work, and connect to people around them. But make a concerted effort to connect because, like I said, who you know is the first route into anywhere, right? Um, because you can have all the hard skills in the world, but if you don't know anyone, you're maybe not even getting an interview. And if you don't have communication skills, you might get the interview, and the people who are interviewing you are like, I don't want to work with this guy. Like, yeah, he seems smart, but he seems like a jerk, right? So, and you don't need to go to school to work on your communication skills. You could get up off the computer right now and walk down the street and just interact with everyone. Like I do it myself. Like I can interact with, there are transferable skills from interacting with a homeless person that can't even speak English well. You gain patience. You gain, it's not about you. And those are real skills like that are observable, right? Like the person who thinks before they answer a question, their answer carries more weight. Even if the answer is like a long awkward pause and followed by a, I don't really know. I'm not really sure. That answer gets so much more respect than the person who knows the answer but is like just going at a mile a minute, or they're like they're humming and hawing a lot because they're not taking a chance, like they're not taking the time to just thoughtfully answer the question. So but I'm going to get back to the practical thing. So if you're interested in cybersecurity, you should, and you absolutely should get some certifications, right? So one of the first ones you get is Security Plus. Okay. But if you're going to get a Security Plus, I would say that depending on what you're going to do in cybersecurity, if you're going to do anything other than say just like GRC work, then you should probably have some type of understanding of networking, right? Um, and you don't have to be like, network expert, but you got to have some idea of networking and protocols. You just have to. Um, so then after that first one, so Security Plus is one. That's CompTIA. The ISC squared has one, the SSCP. That's actually the first one I got, which is a System Security Certified Practitioner. GIAC has one. I have that as well, but that's really pricey. It's GIAC Certified Security Essentials. One of those three as a baseline, great. Then where you go from there really kind of depends on where you're focused. Now, there are some that are kind of always good to have. So you might want to consider doing some of the vendor specific ones in the cloud. So the Azure or GCP or AWS, just to have like at least the fundamental ones, right? Then I would then you got to start thinking about like which direction you're really trying to go. maybe the next cert isn't even a cybersecurity cert. Maybe it's certified project management, right? Like different ones like that. But don't make it be like in your mind like a fixed, like a carved in stone pathway. Have it rather like okay, this is the next one I'm going to do, and then after that I'm going to do this or this. But you like don't make it like so rigid that you can't pivot because things change, right? But what's more important than all that though, like I cannot stress enough, what's more important than all of that is your network of people, your ability to communicate with people. That's the, because you know what? There's so much more important than the hard skills, because here's the thing. You go into a place and you're like, maybe you do know your stuff, right? And you come across like you're confident in your stuff. But the problem is almost too confident in the sense that someone questions whether you are able to learn because well, this person already feels like they know it all. Our environment's different. We use some things that they haven't used or don't have experience with, and they can't possibly know this because they're not here. So maybe we should hire the lesser experienced person who is very friendly and seems very eager to learn. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's actually better. And I think that is what people usually base on the most. Thank you, Junior Williams, for your words of advice, for picking your brain on when it comes to AI and its usage and where we can apply it. Where can people find you?
On LinkedIn. That's the only social
Mm.
media I'm on. So you can find me at LinkedIn. It's Junior W.
Yeah,
Also
we shall include it in the show notes. Yeah.
and also my personal website. So trustcyber.ca.
Okay, that's fine. I need to add it. Yeah. Okay.
And from trustcyber.ca, you can see my research papers. It has links to my LinkedIn, my YouTube, and Substack.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And see you all in the next episode.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Mm.